Hello, weird friends. Welcome. I'm Jason White. This is Jason's Weird Reads, and today I'm going to be doing From the Hip, number 26. And if you don't know what From the Hip is, this is where I like to talk with you. I like to discuss a few things here and there. Sometimes they're personal, sometimes, or actually pretty much all the time, they're somehow related to the channel. And then I like to, this is a recent reads edition, which is typical for From the Hip. And so how about we get into it? First, I'm going to start off with the personal stuff, as I usually do, and then we're going to go into what I've been reading and what I'm currently reading. So I just want to mention at the beginning here that I have added a new tier to the Patreon. It's $2.50 over in the States. Basically, what you get for that tier is you get your name on a card at the beginning of each video, and you get a shout out at the beginning of each new podcast that I release. So it's just one podcast where I'll shout out your name, but with the videos you'll see your name at the beginning of each and every video. I decided to do that because I'm hoping to bring more people in, and I'm still thinking about adjusting and adding things, so you might see something. I was thinking, because on the $5 tier, that's USD money again, you get weekly vlogs, and which wasn't exactly planned, but I decided it was kind of an easy thing to do, I found. So if you really want the vlogs from me, you want them regularly, you can go to the Patreon and sign up. And so lately my videos have been coming a little bit less lately, and I'm saying this a lot, but there's always a reason. Life always gets in the way, and this time I'm sort of stepping on myself here, with doing the Patreon stuff, doing the podcasting stuff, and my own writing. I've only had time to do one video a week right now, and so that's, I guess, the way it's going to be for a little bit until I can adjust my schedule. I think that my schedule will adjust more so in the summer, but I'm not too sure. I find that I have a lot more energy during the summer, and in the winter months that energy goes down significantly. So as I said, with the podcasts, you're going to get seasonal, and those seasons are from March to November, where I take about 3 months off from doing at least a lot of it during the winter months. And you might see, well, you always see my video content go down during the winter as well. So I've allowed myself to take it easier during the winter months because of how hard it can be on me, until maybe I get like an actual UV light that I can shine in my face for 20 minutes a day. That might help a lot. I've never actually used that, but I want to. Alright, so I think that's pretty much what's been going on lately. Work has been going great, and I'm starting to feel the spring vibes hitting. The world around me is starting to wake up, and springtime always feels like morning to me. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but I find myself in the morning, I'm always groggy and tired. And so that's the way I've been this spring, and every spring that I can remember, I'm kind of groggy and tired, but good times are on the way. All right, so book club choice for for April. I had January written down here. I don't know what that's about, but April's book club, and we're well on our way. I'm halfway through already, but we're reading The Boatman's Daughter by Andy Davidson. Now, this book is a trip. First of all, I've talked about this on my vlog on the Patreon, but I'm going to discuss my thoughts here as well. The writing for this is a little dense. It's like an interesting kind of poetic writing style, and one thing I really love about that is it doesn't come across as purple. if anything, it comes across as a little bit complicated, and sometimes you have to reread something to see if you missed something because you didn't entirely understand it. I started this book reading the audiobook, but that really wasn't working for me because of the weird language. He'll start like his sentences like he's a very good writer, and that he knows how to break the rules in order to make very I wouldn't say it's not exactly complicated. What makes it complicated is just the way he writes, where he puts his clauses and his parenthetical asides and all that. But there's no run-on sentences. There's at least not that I remember. Each sentence does make sense. Sometimes it just kind of gets lost in my brain. But reading it instead of listening to it is the way I'm able to consume this type of writing. So I highly recommend this so far. I'm exactly halfway. I didn't get to read yesterday because yesterday was so busy, but I'm hoping to dig into this again today. I really want to finish this week, and I'm really enjoying it. But if you want to read this book and go talk about it with us on the book club, you can do so. Go to the Fable app, and you just do first of all, the link is in the show notes down there. And if you don't want to click on the link, you can just go to the Fable app and search for Jason's Weird Reads, and you'll find us. And this is what we're reading, and I think it's one of the best ones so far that we've read. And videos. I don't know why I said videos. What am I currently reading? Well, this was one of them. I'm really enjoying it, but I just started The House of Bad Memories by Michael David Wilson. Now, I don't know much about this book. I want to go in it completely blind, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do, not with a haunted house, but with maybe like a bad place vibe. I'm not too sure. I know it's got some kind of, I don't want to say haunting, but something like that. But I think it also involves like a crime story. I could be completely wrong. I did read the synopsis about a month or two ago. But the reason why I'm reading this book is I'm going to be having Michael David Wilson on the show here. I'm really excited for that because I've been a fan of his for a long time, for about 10 years, honestly. Maybe 9-10 years, because he's the host for the This Is Horror podcast. And he's talked to almost every horror writer out there. And I've also read his other book, The Girl from the Video. I really, really enjoyed that. It's a great novella. And so I want to talk to him maybe about that, but also The House of Bad Memories. So I'm really hoping I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy it. I've enjoyed pretty much everything that I've read and heard from Michael David Wilson. So that's going to be interesting. So if you want to check out that interview, it's 2 weeks from now, and you can go get yourself a copy of The House of Bad Memories. I believe it's on Kindle Unlimited, so if you're a member of that, you can go read it basically for free. And come along and ask Michael some questions. And I'm also, I was going to put this in my current reading, but I actually finished it before I could come to here to sit at this table and talk about it. But I read The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu, and I'm going to save talking about that book until the next From the Hip, because technically I finished it in April, and these From the Hips I've been following the months lately because I have like a lot more than just one handful of books that I've read each month. I at least have 2 handfuls, so that's going to be included in that. But spoiler alert, I really enjoyed it. And so therefore I have just started, actually I haven't technically started it yet, but I'm going to be starting The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu as well, which is the sequel to The Three Body Problem. And I've been wanting to read this book for a while, and it's kind of a funny story because I was watching Rachel talk about it on her channel in one of her videos recently, and she was talking about it because of the Netflix show that adapted the Three Body Problem. And I've commented on her channel more than once saying that I've got to read The Three Body Problem. I really want to read it and blah, blah, blah. And this time I did the same thing. I was like, you know what? In my comment to her video, I said, I didn't know that the Netflix show was out already. Holy cow. So I've really got to read The Three Body Problem. And she responded with, yes, you do. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll get into it. So I read it. And yeah, so now I'm digging into The Dark Forest, because this series, it didn't blow my mind yet, but it's still fascinating. It's just like, this is the type of science fiction that I want to read. I want to read about the wonders of space, and this has a little bit of that. Also has a lot of alien contact type stuff, which I also find fascinating. So definitely. All right, so what have I been reading? Well, at the beginning of March, I was still in my Bosch mood, and I read a couple more. I read The Last Coyote by Michael Connelly. Now, this book is really interesting because if you've read this series at all, the first 3 books, Bosch is confronted with the idea that his mother was a prostitute, which sounds like an insult, but in his case, it's actually the truth. And the second thing he has to confront, especially in The Concrete Blonde, where he's put on trial for killing somebody who was killing prostitutes, they're examining whether or not he shot the serial killer in a sort of unconscious way to get back at whoever killed his mother, because his mother was murdered. And so this book, The Last Coyote, Bosch, being Bosch, gets in some trouble. He punches one of his higher ups in the face, and of course because of that he gets suspended for a certain amount of time. He has to go get therapy, and when the therapist deems him ready to go back, then he'll be able to go back to work. So while he's off, he decides to investigate his mother's murder, and so of course he investigates it, and I'm going to leave it at that. I was about to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it, but it's another one of the best Bosches out there, I think. I really enjoyed digging into Bosch's past and what happened to his mother, because, as I said, the first 3 books really deals with that issue that he has. An interesting thing about it is that Bosch goes through the first 3 books thinking that it doesn't really affect him, that he's okay, but the thing that makes him a realistic person is that in truth he's not okay. This is bugging him, it haunts him, and this is something he has to do. So this book is a huge character growth book for Bosch, and it has an interesting result. And the next book I read by Michael Connelly in the Bosch universe is Trunk Music. This one is just a bit more of a return to form after Bosch has dealt with his past. He goes back to work, and somehow he's like in a leader role in a sense, and there's somebody found in their car, in the trunk of their car, with a bullet in their head, and there's a team of them investigating this, and it looks like a mafia hit, but Bosch of course is on the case, and as typical Bosch, he feels that there's something off about this murder, and so he goes, obviously he's investigating, he's like the leader of this investigation, and it leads to some interesting but not quite so, well, it's a little bit predictable, I think, which is fine, but this was one of the weaker of the Bosch books in my opinion, but it's still a lot of fun. All right, I also read The Mindworms by Nicholas Kaufman. Now, this book I've talked extensively, because not only did I talk about it in some vlogs that I've done here on the channel and on the Patreon, but I talked to the author himself, and we talked about this book for close to an hour. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about The Mindworms, safe to say, though, that I really enjoyed this book. If you don't know what the Mindworms is, if this is your first time here, this is a series, the Dr. Laura Powell series, and the Mindworms is book 3. But you don't have to worry about the first 2 books, because if there's anything you need to know, Nicholas Kaufman explains exactly what you need to know pretty simply, so there's nothing really hanging over from the other books plot-wise, but despite that, the character Dr. Laura Powell is haunted by the events of the first 2 books. But this is, I think, the best one in the series. That's why I'm like, go start this book. It's also the goriest. I've said that this book, it approaches the border of extreme. I wouldn't say it's an extreme book, but there's some scenes in this book that definitely kind of go there. So that's one reason why I really enjoyed this book. Other than the story itself is it's about a young man, Jordan Mintz, who is an environmental scientist, and they're working with like the permafrost. I think it's in the Arctic. Basically, you know, they're digging into the ice, and he comes down with certain symptoms, and one of them is that he dies. He dies, and everyone thinks he's dead. Even the medical examiner, who is Dr. Laura Powell, says he's dead, and she's just about to give him an autopsy. She's just about to cut into his chest and do the Y incision when he wakes back up. And this is called the Lazarus effect, and that's fucking terrifying, if you ask me. But he's also, when he was alive and before he died, he was sweating green, and so there's something odd going on with our new friend Jordan here. So when he comes back to life, he goes back. He gets discharged from the hospital, and he tries to return back to living his life when he notices that he's exceptionally hungry, and he starts pigging out. Like, this isn't really his this isn't the way he acts. He's like stuffing food down, like he's scarfing large, you know. He's like, and still, even though he's eaten way more than he's used to ever eating, he's still hungry, and he starts to be able to smell the meat and the blood off the people around him, like his loved ones, his sister, his soon-to-be husband. He starts craving their flesh. I'm gonna leave it at that, but you can kind of tell where that's going. And let me tell you, there's something going on with him medically, and that when I talk with Nicholas Kaufman during these books, we always talk about weird science, and because these books use weird science, and there's some interesting weird science in this book, and stuff that's going on with Jordan. And if you've hated wasps before, you know, those terrible fucking overlord bee type creatures, you're gonna hate wasps even more after this book, let me tell you that. So yeah, that's the Mindworms. I really enjoyed it. It's my favorite of the series, and you very well may see this book appear in my top 10 at the end of the year. I can't say for sure, but I had a blast reading that book. All right, next I read A Lush and Seething Hell by John Horner Jacobs. Now, this book I read for the week of Weird, and let me tell you, it was a lot of fun. Well, fun maybe isn't the word. This is weird fiction, so it's got that literary feel to it, horror literary feel to it. It's also a slow burn, but I find myself having fun with that. So for me it was fun, but you might not find it fun. There's 2 novellas in here, and the first novella is well, they're both, the one thing I like about it is they're both set in they're both set in concrete in a normal everyday world, which is the way most horror stories start, but I find that weird fiction does this even more so. You get really caught up in the mundane things of life, and maybe whatever's haunting the character from real life circumstances, like somebody's lost something or someone and they're mourning, or they're just depressed, or maybe they're not even depressed. Laird Barron is famous for not having the woe is me type character. He has these typically strong characters who are, you know, and they find something terrible and weird at the end. And this is Lush and Seething Hell. Both the stories have that vibe going in them, where you're set in a concrete reality, but by the end of it, everything kind of goes surreal, and reality comes. The question of reality and what is reality kind of comes into the question. I think it's best to go into. I went into these stories absolutely blind. I've heard people talking about these books. I even heard John Horner Jacobs talk about this book on podcasts and whatnot, but I still didn't know what the stories were about. I think it's best to go into these stories completely blind so you can get swept up in the writing, because the writing is absolutely beautiful, and then you can get caught up in the weirdness that happens at the end. So next up, I read The Fisherman by John Langan. This was a reread for me, and I read it for our March group read over at the Jason's Weird Reads book club on the Fable app. And I think one reason why I didn't enjoy it as much as the first time is because I had to stop halfway through in order to read stuff for the week of Weird. I think I might have enjoyed it more had I not done that. But it's not just that. It was the middle part. The middle part, which I really enjoyed the first time around, this time irritated me. And it was the writing style. And I don't understand why that happened. But John Langan switches from, I guess, like a typical modern day prose to an old one from, just say, 1900s for that middle part. And one thing that annoys me about it is it's being told by a guy who works in a diner. This is like his verbal speech, although it is mentioned that they remembered everything he said and jotted it down afterwards, and that's what you're reading. But still, it just doesn't seem right that that this guy would be talking in this sort of antiquated way. And I just found it kind of hard to pay attention to. But still, it's a fascinating book. I think it's going to be a modern classic, even though you can get it on Kindle, but as of right now, it's out of print, the print copy, but I think they're bringing it back. I'm not sure. I hope they do. I also read The Gunslinger by Stephen King. Now, I did this. I kind of went and hijacked a fellow booktuber's plan, and I like an overlord, I didn't take control. It's still her project, but I'm reading this with Sin from Sin's Book Nook, and we're going to be talking about this on the podcast. We're going to be talking about the Dark Tower series on the podcast, and we've already recorded the first episode for that, so you can look forward to that in the future. But The Gunslinger was a reread for me, but I read it like 15 to 20 years ago, and honestly, I didn't remember much from it. What I remembered mostly was the gunslinger wandering through the desert. I remembered the boy Jake, and I remembered the end, the weirdness at the end, and it being like mind-blowingly weird. Now, the ending wasn't as weird this time around, because all he really does when you go into that weird stuff, the Man in Black talking about the cosmos and stuff like that, and I don't know why I had so much trouble, or why I struggled with that so much the first time around, but this time it was just kind of trippy and psychedelic, I guess. But I really enjoyed my read of The Gunslinger, and I'm hoping that my discussion with Sin over on the podcast, and it's going to be exclusive to the podcast, that's important to remember, because that's kind of where I want to go with the podcast. I want to talk about books, not just talk about authors and their books. I kind of want to take that direction where I'm talking with authors and talk about books and stuff like that with them, while at the same time promoting their own work. I just haven't figured out the finer details of that yet. But I thought, because I was watching Sin on one of her videos, and she said that she was going to read The Dark Tower because she's really bad at reading series. And I I commented on her video, and I was like, hey, you want an accountability buddy? And she was like, yeah, sure. So I was like, okay, I'm on board with The Dark Tower. And then after that, my brain started spinning, and I'm like, I gotta add this to the podcast. This is like a great beginning to the idea of talking about books with other people. And so then I messaged her over on Voxer, and I was like, hey, do you want to, I've been thinking about doing this thing with my podcast. Do you want to be involved? And she was like, yeah. So if you're unfamiliar with Sin and Sin's Book Nook, I highly suggest you go and I'm going to put the link to her channel in the show notes. And I'm going to be doing that a lot because we're going to be talking about this a lot in the future on the podcast. But you should go and check her out. She's already reviewed this book on her channel. And go subscribe to her. She's awesome. She's absolutely awesome. I love her channel. And I love the Gunslinger. Next up, I read Portable Magic by Mark Allen Gunnels. Now this is a short story collection, and I did a review on this on TikTok that I posted to my Instagram as well, and in it I said it was an ode to Ray Bradbury, and that's only partially right. What this book is actually an ode to reading itself, and it's like I said, it's a collection of short stories. It has a wraparound in it, and these stories are wonderful. It's not horror. I think Mark wants to stress that it's not horror, because a lot of people might go into this thinking it's horror, but it's not. It's what I just said. It's an ode to reading, and in some part to writing. Mark Allen Gunnels is a huge reader, and he's also a writer. He's a very prolific writer. And I'm going to be talking to him later today. So, well, I will have talked to him by the time you guys see this video. So I hope I saw you all there. And but this collection of short stories is it borders on like the fantastical magic realism type of story. And honestly, a lot of it has those feel-good feelings that I love, that Mark Allen Gunnels really getting good at being able to produce. When you read his horror, though, he can get really nasty as well. So I always found that an interesting contrast. The only other person I've seen do that is like Stephen King, where they can be absolutely brutal and nasty in one story, and then be kind of, feel-goody in the next story. These stories, I would say 90% of them have those feel-good feels, maybe even might make you tear up a little. But there's also a post-apocalyptic story in here too that kind of gets a little brutal by the end. I wouldn't say that's absolutely brutal, but there's a little bit of brutality in there. It's a great story. It's a great collection, and really looking forward to talking to him about it. All right, last up here, I read Feral by Gemma Amor. I think this is like a novelette or maybe a very short novella. She released it, I believe, in March, maybe February, but probably March. This book it was a really quick read for me. I think I read it in 2 sittings, when I could have read it in 1 sitting, and you probably could too. This book is the type of stuff that I was fascinated, maybe obsessed with when I was younger. It's taken from a female point of view, so there's a lot of female issues in there, which makes complete sense. But what really drew me and I identified with was the return to the way we used to live. Now, I don't want to go live in the bush. I'm too old to do that now. I would bitch and moan the whole time, and I would be depressed. And I would hurt. My body would hurt. It would ache from having to sleep on like very uncomfortable circumstances. But what I'm trying to get here is this book is about kind of returning. There's the main character has this desire to return to the way things used to be. It's not said that specifically. It's more of an instinctual thing. The main character is becoming depressed with having to take care of herself and to live up to society's standards, especially for women. And because it's ridiculous how women are expected to keep themselves up, wear makeup every day, put their hair up, keep their hair clean, and always be smiling and bright and happy. It's like they're not allowed to show that they're not okay sometimes, which is sad. But, men do have a little bit of an issue with that as well. The main theme of this book is, I think, well, that's a big theme. I would say actually that's probably the main theme. But the main theme that I attached myself to was the way we live is not the way we're designed to live. And there is this deep inner desire to wander in the woods and to forage our own food and to go back, in a sense, to the way things were before we started building houses and coming up with schedules and clocking the time all the time, and having to upkeep everything in this weird way that we have decided to live. Because what it comes down to is we're all animals. We are from the animal kingdom. We just built houses and we speak with words. So that was Feral. I highly recommend this book. It's a fascinating look into human psychology and especially female psychology, and I loved it. This one could make the end of the year top 10 list as well. All right, so that is the end of this From the Hip. If you stayed this long, leave me a stack of books down there in the darkness, and I'll leave you some books as well. Keep being weird, my friends. Keep being creative, and I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.